Of course, she's here to talk about what is normally happening every 7th of June, declared by the United Nations, that is World Food Safety Day. But before we go into discussion, let me quickly tell you that Folake Henshaw holds a BSc Biology, obtained in 1980 from the University of Ife, Nigeria, and MSc Food Science and Microbiology, obtained in 1983 from the University of Hey, help me. Thank you very much. Glasgow, Scotland, UK. Okay, she joined the services of the then Federal University of Technology, Abeokuta, now Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, as an assistant lecturer in 1983. She rose through the ranks and was appointed Professor of Food Technology in October 2008. Professor Henshaw has extensive teaching and research experience. Her current research interests relate to promoting sustainable food systems. She has also been engaged in consultancy in food safety, education, and training, and is committed to increasing awareness and adoption of safe food principles by actors along food chain. Once again, let me welcome Professor Folake Henshaw to discuss today, World Food Safety Day. Let me start this way. World Food Safety Day, what are we trying to actually proclaim here by having a day set aside by the United Nations for not World Food Day, but food safety? The safety there should be of major concern to us. So what are we trying to proclaim?
Okay, thank you. The World Food Safety Day inaugurated in 2019 on the resolution of the United Nations. And it was born out of the fact that the burden of foodborne diseases on a global basis was considered to be very high.
Wow.
And the statistics go as 10% of the world population suffer illnesses, foodborne illnesses annually on a global basis. So when you say 10%, let's put the actual figure. 600 people fall ill from eating unsafe food every year on a global basis. 2, 420,000 die globally every year from foodborne illnesses. And then out of the number of mortality, 40% are children, because whenever we talk of health problem, the most vulnerable groups are children, the elderly, and the immunocompromised people, or people who already have health burdens. So that was the reason the world came together to conduct the first food safety conference in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. It was a Food and Agricultural Organization, WHO, and hosted by the African Union at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I was fortunate to be in that conference.
Okay.
And the theme of the conference was transforming knowledge into actions for people, for economies, and for the environment. So the World Food Safety Day was born out of that
conference,
the Intergovernmental Conference. So the summary there was, if it is not safe, it is not food.
Now, for the fact that it's not safe, that non-safety, is it natural or man-made when it comes to food? You read out some statistics now.
Yes.
Could it be considered natural disaster or man-made disaster?
Well, as far as food safety is concerned, the theme of the food safety will help us to answer that question, because the theme says food safety is everyone's business. So food safety is foodborne diseases and food safety problems are preventable.
Okay.
So that means it's not a natural disaster.
Yeah.
It's something that we say that we want to produce, process, and store and distribute and retail food in a way that it will not cause health problems. The practices, the means of handling that we're going to be engaging in, and if there are actions and inactions of stakeholders, there are going to be gaps.
Can I say everything that is that we have that has been given to us by our Creator as good enough for food are safe, except for, but depending now on the way we handle them. Is that what you're saying, madam?
Exactly. So the stakeholders in the food chain, beginning from the farm, you know that all foods are either plants or of animal origin. That's what we convert to food. So it starts from the farm and it runs through the entire chain until it gets to your table. So we always say food safety from farm to fork. Because if it doesn't begin on the farm, that's the first point of production. So food safety from production to consumption. So the actions of farmers, how do they produce? Are they engaged in good agricultural practices? What chemicals do they use? Agrochemicals?
To preserve.
What quality of water do we use to irrigate and cultivate? The animal production, livestock production, fish production? What kind of health care do we give the animals that are going to become food? Do we just dose them with antibiotics? Do we just add chemicals to their foods? You know, so all these things are the actions or inactions of the stakeholders.
Looking at the chain, where can we say could be the most dangerous along this chain?
Every stage is important.
Yeah.
Every stage is important. That's why we say food safety is everybody's business. That means it's a shared responsibility. So I can't say that if the farmer had already produced a contaminated product, what is the processor going to use? Is that contaminated product? And when it comes to some form of contamination, okay, let me give you an example. There are different hazard points that the food can encounter along the chain. We have physical hazards, we have biological hazards, we have chemical hazards. You know, today we are also going to see the connectivity with the current pandemic in the world, which is the disease that is ravaging the whole globe and has made economies to stand still, livelihoods to be lost, income, and of course, the most important, the loss of life. Many people have died from the pandemic. So we are saying that every stage is important and responsibility must be taken by the actors at that stage. And the responsibility is shared. We will see the three broad categories of people responsible to make sure that our food is safe. The government, because they have the power of regulation and law. Control, funding, empowering agencies to perform their functions, government, and also providing adequate infrastructure to make sure that there is an environment that will be conducive to safe food production. Good sanitation, waste disposal, good roads, potable water, availability. So these are government rules. The producers involving processors, manufacturers, distribution, outfits, warehousing, storage, retail, food service operators, restaurants, eateries, our local buffeterias, and up to the market women who retail food, both raw and prepared food, up to the consumer who is going to consume the food on the table. So everybody's action or inaction is important. We can't say, oh, if the farmer produces a bad crop, I can change it when it gets, no. So we must all take up the responsibility. The level of responsibility, of course, will differ. I expect it to start from the head, and that is government responsibility to make sure that there's control, there's provision of the adequate facilities for people to comply. If I tell somebody, don't use bad water to prepare your food, but there is no potable water, there are no good quality water in the vicinity, what do you think the person will do? He's going to use anything he says. And we see such unwholesome practices in our food chain. People washing fresh fruits and vegetables with water from the flood and just any water they see, and people are going to consume directly. So,
Prof, let me ask this question.
Yeah.
In a pandemic situation that we find ourselves right now, let's stay with Nigeria. How safe is our food, or how unsafe could our food be, especially when some stakeholders are now concerned mainly with preventing the spread of the pandemic called COVID-19 and neglecting some other areas? Just yesterday, the federal government came out to say that the mortality and child mortality rate is high because attention is on preventing. Can that affect safety of food too?
Yes, and absolutely. How safe is our food? It can be safer and must be safer. That's what I would say. I won't say that, there is no problem. There are problems. And one of the things we're doing now is that these are things that can be solved. It's not rocket science. We don't need to go to the moon. We will solve them if everybody takes responsibility. So we don't, I won't say that the food is safe, absolutely. We will say we want the food to be safer. And we must do things, take action. That's why the World Food Safety Day, we must look for ways, raise awareness so that we can prevent and manage food safety problems and reduce the risk of foodborne diseases. So that's why the day is being observed. And all actors, stakeholders, professional bodies, are doing all this campaign as we speak towards the day, which is tomorrow precisely. So we need to know that food safety, I said it, if it's not safe, it's not food, is the foundation of food security. Because food security means access, both physical and economic access, to safe and nutritious food. So if the food is not safe, it cannot supply nutrients. If it cannot supply nutrients, then you can't grow or be healthy eating it. So once we know that, we must place the appropriate premium on food safety. And we are here today on the coronavirus issue, which is the pandemic. The incidence, which is a global thing, has been an eye-opener to the way we are prepared to run emergencies or crises in our own country. And so we should learn the lessons from that for future occurrences. Also, to say that the population is already beset with a lot of burden, health burden. Coronavirus is not the only health burden around. It's just that it is the current crisis that the world is in. It's a pandemic, and all the measures being put in place is to prevent further spread and to flatten the curve, as the health experts have been saying. So what do we know about corona today? We know that it's a severe acute respiratory coronavirus that causes a disease which we are calling COVID-19.
Yeah.
And it is a confirmed respiratory disease. all the symptoms we are told, coughing, sneezing,
High fever.
having a high temperature.
Yeah.
So, and that the transmission avenue can be from people suffering it when they release fluid into the air, which becomes aerosolized. That means it's carried in the air. And if you are now in contact, you can catch it. So the basic things that we have been told to prevent and lower pandemic are very, very foundational to food safety. For example, when you wash your hands, you will not have a contamination in your hand with simple things like soap and water. Everybody have access to soap and water. And then sanitizer containing at least 60% alcohol to sanitize. In food safety, these are things that go on in standard food environments and food businesses and industries, which we refer to as good hygienic practices. So that is good. So the COVID pandemic is a call for us to strengthen food safety. Though the organism, the virus as we know it, is not foodborne, there are other viruses that are foodborne. The norovirus and the hepatitis A virus are foodborne. But this particular virus, the SARS-CoV-2, as it's called, is the virus that's causing COVID-19, is not foodborne. So far as scientific evidence today, a lot of research being done, nobody has been able to see that. So that way, we are a bit safe, but it is human to human transmitted. So all the precautions we are doing, washing our hands, maintaining physical distance. As a matter of fact, I prefer to use the word physical distance than social distance, because today you don't need distance to relate socially. Everybody's on social media and we are relating, but physical distance, 2 meters apart at least, so that the aerosol that is airborne will dissipate within that distance. So if you are that far, it doesn't get to you. So that is very, very important. And what I want to emphasize is, when the pandemic has been controlled, we must maintain these good practices. Now, when it comes to food, you know that in food, I'll give us a brief summary. There are ways we can keep food safe. Cleaning is one of them. Good hygienic practices. So in the food environment, just washing your hands is just the basic. We must also disinfect. Cleaning and disinfecting, they are not the same. Yes. Cleaning will remove dirt. This particular virus, the reason we are saying soap and water is because the structure of the virus, and viruses generally, do not replicate outside a living cell.
Okay.
But this coronavirus has a lipid envelope, like a covering, that is protecting the protein structure of the virus. So if you just use alcohol, chlorine solution, soap, the lipid covering will be removed and the virus becomes vulnerable, and then it can't survive. So that's what it does. But when we come to a food environment, we need to do more than that. Because now in a pandemic, you have to be making sure that the workers observe all the precautions that we have mentioned, maintaining physical distances. Then we need to disinfect all our surfaces and contact points where we handle food. Tables, the tabletops, the utensils that we use, disinfecting. Normal household bleach. If you take a teaspoon, that's 5 mils. You need just 0.1%. See, that's like 10 mils in 1,000 mils. So, like if you take 2 teaspoons and put it in maybe 10 liters of water and use it to mop all the surfaces, you have disinfected. And then places like your doorknobs, everybody touches the doorknobs. You go in, you come in, so regular disinfectant. And then people serving food, apart from washing your hands, do not use bare hands to pick food that people are going to consume directly. You either are going to be using a sanitizer to sanitize your hand. So these practices must be strengthened.
That's almost at the final point. I've listened to you, I've enjoyed you, but you also mentioned the issue of government and some major stakeholders. So, looking at what we have specified now, how do we make it work and start with it? For example, at the marketplace, which is the first contact point that people go to. We have the people will, the butchers will work at the, that has to be disinfected too. They might not be able to do it at the level of market association, and that's why the government comes in. Can we realize this? Can we get it done? Are we really serious about it? Because all that I've mentioned is maybe when it gets to my house, and of course when it gets to the restaurant, you'll be sure that all these things will be done. But what about the starting point, the marketplace, where we get this food?
Okay. Well, the marketplace, as we said, is not the starting point, it's the farms, production, primary production. But let's take that stage. That's the middle stage in the chain.
Yeah, sure.
So it is the education of our people, which I will refer to as communicating risks. We need to communicate risks to people in order to manage the risk. So in the marketplace, there are things people can do. They also should observe all what we have been saying, even in the marketplace. The way you present food in the marketplace, you must take note of it now. Things that are going to be cooked, they are separate from things that you will not cook. I will give you an example. If you go on our streets now, you see people selling, or in the market, peanuts, groundnuts that have been peeled.
Yeah, sure.
And they were peeled by people.
Yeah.
They were put in the bottle with people's hands.
Yeah.
So that must change. You can't be peeling things and blowing with your mouth in a pandemic. At any time, we shouldn't be doing that. That's a wrong practice, which must stop. So the market people, I should say, fall under the sector that we call the informal sector.
Okay.
That is, they are not as regulated as the formal sector. They are not as informed. So what we are doing severally in a stakeholder, different stakeholders, my professional body, NGOs, we are educating people.
Okay.
And we want government to support that with policy.
Okay.
And such policy will be something like mandatory training for all involved in offering food to public health, to the public, for public health protection. You must have a mandatory training. I know that the Ministry of Health does something like go and collect food vendors' certificate, do X-ray, something, go and do TB check. It's not enough, because that happens once a year. The certificate, they have to go and do the test once a year. That's not enough. You must train, educate, and retrain people who are engaged in food businesses at the market level. That is going to be mandatory. That is, it's not optional. And it's only government that can support that. If you tell people, go and meet Professor Nsho in UNAB and get trained and pay money, they're not going to do it. But if the government says, please, FUNAB, you have the capacity, train all our vendors, they should send them for training, facilitate the training, then the people will be informed, then they mandate them. There will be a law. Don't sell your food exposed. You will see people selling exposed foods.
Prof, let me ask this simple question. Yeah, talking about selling exposed foods, we know the economic capacity, it's not uniform. What I can afford, somebody might not be able to afford. Let's take as simple as fruit, for example, watermelon. people like you will tell us it is always good to buy your pineapple wholesome, buy your watermelon, take it home, and of course, but many people cannot afford it, so they cut, even though they put in nylon, and of course, people still go buy. Can we buy? Once we buy, how do we make sure that when we eat, we don't eat contaminated fruits?
Okay.
Yeah.
It is the actor that is producing your cut or sliced fruits that I will talk to. Do it properly. Store it properly. Okay? Now, those two things, the two things I just said, it's not being done. I see people slicing watermelon with bare hands. I see people slicing them and putting them in polythene that they blow
with their mouth.
Yes. So those are wrong things that are being done, and they don't know the risk involved. When we communicate risk to them through food safety education and training, that is what I always emphasize. Education, 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 because knowledge is prevention. When you know something, you can prevent it. Because if you don't know, you fall a victim. There was a video that went around where a hawker of fruits was washing them in the gutter drain. He doesn't know. He probably eats out of the fruit himself. For him, it's not a problem. But it is a problem. We must educate people. So if the man is a certified food vendor, for example, and he has a small sticker, and says food vendor, certified, Ministry of Health or something, then he's certified to be doing that. He would have been trained. He wouldn't use his bare hands, and so the public is safe to buy and do what? And eat.
We're running out of time, but how safe is our suya? Because we are used to the system of suya from the day immemorial. It's the same way. We see the malam. We know how they prepare suya, use bare hands to cut it for us, and we are okay. Well, for so many years, nothing has happened. Thank God we didn't have a food-borne disease. But in this period of pandemic, can we go ahead? Can we say, since it's been fired, so to say, thoroughly?
Yes. Heat is always a good way to take care of a lot of organisms.
Okay.
And let me say that coronavirus is the least problem for foodborne organisms. There are more dangerous organisms that can infect our food, contaminate our food, and that can be deadly. Then for you to say that you are eating a particular food, there's been no disease. Foodborne diseases are either acute or chronic. It could be immediate, but it could be long-term that will still show up. So the WHO has said that the diseases that affect food, they are up to, foodborne diseases are up to 200. Simple, starting with something as simple as stomach ache, diarrhea, as so many organ failure, up to cancer. So there are many diseases. I will not want to be specific in attacking any food trade because it's a livelihood source. And that's why I says that the COVID-19 pandemic is an underscoring event on the need to strengthen best practices in food safety along the food chain from farm to fork. It is an additional burden on the health of populations which are already, burdened with poor nutrition, foodborne illnesses, and hunger. And let's know that food businesses, it's a source of livelihood for almost 90% in Africa. So we can't afford to joke with it. So we must have investment in promoting safe food, and this will also impact positively in curbing the COVID-19 pandemic.
I must thank you very much, Professor Folake Henshaw, for this wonderful time you've had with us on this segment of the program, especially on this day that we celebrate the World Food Safety Day. And the World Food Safety Day couldn't be better discussed than looking at the COVID-19 issue. Once again, thank you very much, Prof, for coming on to the program.
It's been my pleasure.
We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
All right.